At Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport late last month, the temperature bottomed out at 97 degrees Fahrenheit, about 36 Celsius. Be clear about what that number is, because it is easy to hear it wrong. 97 was not the afternoon high. 97 was the low. That was the coolest the air got, somewhere in the dark, with the sun down and the city as quiet as it ever gets, before it all started over again. It is the warmest overnight low ever measured at that airport, matched one other time in the record 3 summers ago. There were no sirens for that, no warning graphic, no live shot, nobody standing in front of a thermometer. It happened while the city was asleep and almost nobody reported it. Here is the part that should stop you. Across this whole summer in Phoenix, daytime high temperatures have broken one daily record. 1. Overnight lows have broken 10. That gap is not a footnote. That gap is the story. Every broadcast this week will lead with 116 degrees, because that is the number that fits on a graphic and the number people search for. 116 is real. It is dangerous, and I will give you the whole forecast in a minute, but it is not the number that decides who comes out of this week alive. That one is printed underneath it in smaller type, and nobody reads it out loud. With an extreme heat warning now covering the lower deserts of Arizona through Saturday evening, that gap is about to get tested harder than it has been all year. My name is Walter. This channel takes no sponsors, no brand deals, and no affiliate money. Nobody pays for a word you hear here, which means nothing gets softened and nothing gets sold to you. If that is the reporting you want, subscribe and turn notifications on, because this is where I will be when the next one hits. Let me start with what is driving it, because the mechanism explains everything that follows. Sitting over the southwest right now is a strong upper-level ridge of high pressure. Forecasters call it a heat dome, and the phrase works as long as you know what it actually describes. It is not a lid made of heat. It is a deep column of high pressure in the middle and upper atmosphere, and high pressure aloft means air is sinking. Sinking air compresses as it descends into thicker atmosphere, and compressed air warms. That warming happens on its own, without any help from the sun, purely because the air is being squeezed. Then the ridge does a second thing. Sinking air is stable air, and stable air will not rise into towering clouds. The cumulus that would normally build over the mountains gets flattened. The thunderstorms that would drop a cold outflow across the valley never form, and the shade and rain that would knock the temperature back never arrive. You lose the brake and keep the accelerator. The National Weather Service office in Phoenix has this pattern holding temperatures roughly 5 to 10 degrees above normal through at least the next week, with little to no thunderstorm activity in that stretch. Understand what that means in late August in Arizona. That is the monsoon switched off. The North American monsoon is the one thing that reliably interrupts desert heat in July and August, and this ridge has parked directly on top of it. Now, the piece that matters more, and the one that never gets explained on television. A desert is supposed to cool off at night. That is the deal the desert makes with you. Dry air holds very little heat and blocks very little outgoing radiation. So once the sun goes down, the ground radiates its warmth straight up and out to space, unobstructed, and the temperature falls hard and fast. That is why the old picture of the desert is a scorching afternoon and a night cold enough for a jacket. 40 and 50-degree swings between the high and the low were ordinary in that valley within living memory. Phoenix has been quietly canceling that deal for about 50 years, and it has done it in 2 ways at once. The first is what the city is made of. Concrete, asphalt, brick, and rooftops have what physicists call high thermal mass. They absorb heat all day and release it slowly long after dark. A desert floor of sand and creosote gives its heat back in a couple of hours. 6 lanes of asphalt and a subdivision of tile roofs give it back all night. The geometry makes it worse because a street lined with buildings is a canyon, and heat radiating off the pavement hits a wall and bounces back down instead of escaping. Metropolitan Phoenix has spent 5 decades building exactly that surface, and the result is one-directional. The daytime highs crept up, the overnight lows climbed faster. The second is moisture. Water vapor absorbs the infrared heat trying to escape upward and radiates a share of it back down. It works like a lid on a pot. On humid monsoon nights, the temperature cannot fall the way it does on a dry night, no matter how clear the sky is. So the valley is caught either way. Dry pattern, and the afternoon runs away. Moist pattern, and the night will not let go. The result is that the low never gets where it used to get, and in a desert, the low is the only recovery you have. Here is where things stand as I record this. The National Weather Service has an extreme heat warning in effect for the Phoenix area through 8 o'clock Saturday evening local time, and an air quality alert out for ozone across the valley and central Arizona. That warning has already been extended more than once, and I would expect it to move again before the week is out. The official forecast has today near 113 degrees, about 45 Celsius. Tomorrow is the peak, near 116, roughly 47 Celsius. Then 113, 112, and 110 to close the week. A few of those days sit within a degree or two of the daily records for the date, which is the reason this event is getting the coverage it is getting. Now watch the other column, the one under the picture of the sun. Tonight, a low around 89. Tomorrow night, around 91. Then 90. Then 90. Then 89. That is 5 consecutive nights in which the air over that city never drops below the upper 80s, and one night where it does not get below 91 degrees. 91 is about 33 Celsius, and I want you to picture where that number lands. That is not 11 at night with the pavement still warm. That is the reading at 4 or 5 in the morning, at the coldest moment of the 24-hour cycle, with the sun still an hour out. That is the best it gets. Everything else in that day is worse. The Weather Service is calling major to extreme heat risk across the lower deserts this week. Let me translate that, because it is a real scale, it is publicly available, and almost nobody has had it explained to them. Heat risk is a 5-level index the Weather Service runs alongside its watches, warnings, and advisories, built with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It exists because a raw temperature tells you very little on its own. 102 degrees is a routine Tuesday in Phoenix and a public health emergency in Seattle. So the index puts the forecast into local historical context instead of handing you a bare number. Green, level 0, is little to no risk. Yellow, level 1, is minor, and it affects the people who are most sensitive to heat. Orange, level 2, is moderate, and it starts reaching anyone without effective cooling and enough water, with some strain showing up in health systems and heat-sensitive industries. Red, level 3, is major, and at that level, anyone without working cooling and adequate hydration is exposed, with impacts likely across hospitals, outdoor industries, and infrastructure. Magenta, level 4, is extreme. And here is the detail that settles the entire argument I am making. To reach level 4, the highest category the federal government issues, a location needs both the daytime high and the overnight low sitting in the top 5% of what is historically normal for that date. And it has to hold there for at least 48 hours. Both, not the high on its own, no matter how spectacular it is. The overnight low is written directly into the definition of the worst heat category the United States government has. And the published description of that category turns on there being little to no overnight relief. Sit with that. The people who built the scale already understand exactly what I am telling you. It is baked into their own product. It just does not survive the trip from the technical discussion to the evening forecast, where you get a high, a graphic, and a commercial break. So why is the night the part that kills? Your body is a heat engine that has to dump waste heat continuously, and it has two tools. It moves blood to the skin so heat can radiate away, and it sweats so evaporation can carry heat off. Both lose effectiveness as the air temperature approaches your skin temperature, and once the air is hotter than you are, radiation stops working in your favor and starts working against you. From there, you are running on sweat alone, and sweat costs water and salt you have to replace. What the body needs is a window to unload and reset. Overnight is that window. When the load drops into the 70s, your core temperature comes back down. Your heart rate settles. The cardiovascular strain of pushing blood to your skin all day comes off, and you start the next morning even. That is the reset. When the low sits at 91, that reset never happens. Your core temperature does not fully return to baseline. Your heart works through the night. Sleep gets shallow and broken, which has its own physiological cost. You wake up already carrying a deficit, and then you stack another day of 116 degrees on top of it. Do that 5 nights running, and the strain compounds rather than resetting, which is why a long heat wave is far more dangerous than a short hot spell, even when the peak temperature is identical. Health departments see this every summer. The deaths do not cluster on the single hottest afternoon. They pile up on day 4, day 5, day 6. And it is worse indoors than the airport reading suggests. Your house is not a weather station in a field. A home with a straining air conditioner, a unit that quit, a tripped breaker, or a bill that did not get paid does not cool overnight either. It holds the day. Interior temperatures in an uncooled house there can stay above 100 degrees deep into the night. And unlike the air outside, that number has nowhere to go by morning. The Maricopa County Department of Public Health has been saying this out loud for years. Their medical director has described sustained heat with high overnight lows as the biggest risk factor they track. Not the peak, the sustain, and the night. If this is useful, subscribe and turn notifications on. Everything in this video comes from named agencies with public data, and I will keep it that way. The numbers behind the night are not subtle. From 1990 through 2020, Phoenix averaged 7 nights a year with a low at or above 90 degrees. 7. Each of the last 3 years has run past 20. This year is already at 21 and climbing, which puts it at roughly triple the long-term average with more than a month of heat season left to run. Zoom out and the trend is national. The climate research organization Climate Central puts summer nighttime warming across the United States at about 3 degrees since the 1970s. In Phoenix, they put it at 6.5 degrees. 6.5 degrees on the overnight low in a single human lifetime, in a city whose entire survival strategy in the desert used to be that it cooled off after dark. That is the setup. Here is the consequence. As of the most recent county surveillance update, the Maricopa County Office of the Medical Examiner had confirmed 81 heat-related deaths this year. At the same point last summer, 35. Another 587 deaths from this year are still under investigation as possibly heat-related, against 376 at the same point a year ago. Before you draw a conclusion from those figures, understand what the two columns are, because this is where a lot of coverage goes wrong. Confirming a heat death is not fast. The medical examiner works each case, reviews scene notes and the death certificate, weighs contributing conditions, and decides whether environmental heat caused the death or contributed to it. That takes months. So the confirmed number you see in the middle of August is always an undercount by design. It is not a live scoreboard. The confirmed column tells you what has been proven. The column under investigation tells you the direction of travel. Both are running well ahead of a year ago. That reverses 2 straight years of improvement, and the improvement was real. Maricopa County recorded 645 heat-related deaths in 2023, which was the worst year they had ever documented. 608 in 2024, the first decrease in a decade. For 2025, I have to give you 2 numbers because the county has published 2. A county release earlier this year put the preliminary count at 427. The county's own final report, published about a month later, identified 430. That is a gap of 3, and there is no scandal in it. It is the ordinary difference between a preliminary tally and a closed one, which is exactly the lag I just described working itself out. But I am going to name both rather than quietly pick the one that suits me. And you should be wary of any channel that does not tell you when its sources disagree, even by 3. County officials have said it is too early to explain why the trend turned this year. They have pointed at one thing, though, and it is worth your attention. Phoenix hit 100 degrees in the middle of March this year, earlier in the calendar than it ever has in the record. At least 9 people died in that stretch, the county's worst March on record for heat. 2 reasons that mattered more than the raw temperature. The first is acclimatization. Your body adapts to heat over weeks, adjusting how much you sweat and how much salt you lose in it. And in March, nobody in that valley is adapted to anything. The second is logistical. The county's heat relief network, the cooling centers and hydration and respite sites, typically does not spin up until the 1st of May. When 100 degrees arrives in March, the response does not exist yet. There is one more thing on the funding side that has not been widely reported. The expansion of that heat relief network, the thing officials credited for 2 years of falling deaths, was paid for substantially with federal pandemic relief money. This season is the final year of that funding. I am not going to tell you what should happen next, because that is a policy argument and it is not my lane. I am telling you the money that bought the improvement runs out, and you should watch what happens to the numbers. Now, where do these deaths actually happen? Because the mental picture most people carry is wrong, and it is wrong in a way that gets people killed. The image is a hiker on a trail at noon in July. That happens, and those cases get coverage because they are visible and obviously preventable. But year after year, a large share of heat deaths in Maricopa County occur indoors, in a house, with the door closed. The county tracks this in detail, and the detail is the part that should change your behavior. In their most recent full year of data, an air conditioning unit was present in the great majority of indoor heat death cases. And among those cases where a unit was present, it was not working in roughly 7 out of 10. The county sorts the reasons into 3 buckets. The unit was non-functioning, the unit was functioning but switched off, or there was no electricity. That pattern has held for years. In a prior year, it was as high as 85% non-functioning. Read that again because it is the most actionable sentence in this video. These are not people who had no air conditioner. These are overwhelmingly people who had one that had broken or been turned off or had no power going to it. The equipment was in the building. It was not running. The demographics follow the same logic. A clear majority of these deaths are people 50 and older. Cardiopulmonary disease is a contributing factor in a large share of cases, along with diabetes, kidney disease, obesity, and a history of falls, because all of those conditions reduce your body's ability to handle heat stress, or your ability to do something about it. Many of the people who die indoors are living alone, and a good number are found only when somebody finally goes to check. That is why the welfare check is not a gesture. In a week like this one, a knock on a door is a medical intervention. There is one more hazard here that gets almost no airtime, and I want to spend a minute on it because it is specific to this environment and it is entirely preventable: the ground. Air temperature and surface temperature are different things, and in direct desert sun, they are not close. Asphalt is dark, and it absorbs the overwhelming majority of the solar radiation that lands on it. Under a Phoenix afternoon, pavement and concrete routinely run 40 to 60 degrees hotter than the air. The Arizona Burn Center at Valleywise Health in Phoenix, which is the largest burn center in the Southwest and takes patients from 6 states, puts outdoor surface temperatures as high as 180 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly 82 Celsius. Their director has pointed out that this is not far off boiling. At those temperatures, skin contact causes a serious burn in seconds, not minutes, seconds. That center has seen summers where dozens of people were hospitalized with contact burns in a matter of weeks, a substantial share needing intensive care, some needing ventilation, and some dying of the injuries. Their own analysis across more than a decade and a half of records shows contact burn cases rising in step with summer temperatures. The mechanism is almost always the same, and it is not carelessness. Somebody older loses their balance and goes down on the pavement. They cannot get themselves back up quickly because that is often why they fell in the first place. 30 seconds on the ground is a deep burn. 2 minutes is surgery. The same applies to anyone with neuropathy in their feet who may be standing on a surface hot enough to injure them and not feel it, and to small children who do not connect a sidewalk with pain until it is too late. Researchers at Arizona State University who study urban heat have measured this on playground equipment, and the numbers are worth knowing if you have small kids. On a 100-degree day, an unshaded metal slide can reach around 160 degrees. Put a shade structure over it and it drops to about 111. Rubber ground covering, the surface we install so children can fall on it safely, measured as high as 188 degrees in the sun. Shade is not a comfort feature in that climate. It is a safety device doing about 50 degrees of work. Now, where is this headed? The ridge holds through the end of the week. Slight rain chances creep back late in the weekend and into early next week as the pattern loosens, and forecasters have suggested it may be early September before the valley gets anything like a real break. Treat that as guidance, not a promise. Long-range model output past about 5 days is a probability distribution, and I am not going to hand it to you as though it were settled. What is reasonably solid is the next 4 to 5 days, and those days are hot in the afternoon and, more to the point, hot at night. So here is what I want you to do. This part is not just for Arizona because every one of these applies anywhere a heat wave sets up. First, stop reading only the high. Pull up your forecast, scroll to the overnight low, and treat any night at or above 90 degrees as a night your body does not get to recover. If you get 2 or 3 of those in a row, plan the following day like you are already tired, because physiologically you are. That single habit is the whole point of this video, and it costs you nothing. Second, put a thermometer where you sleep. The airport reading is not your bedroom. A cheap indoor thermometer tells you what your heart is actually dealing with at 3 in the morning, and it will tell you sooner than you will feel it whether your cooling is losing the fight. Third, have an air conditioning failure plan before the failure. Decide today, while nothing is wrong, who you would call and where you would go. Know whether your unit is under warranty and who services it. The afternoon your compressor dies is not the afternoon to work that out. And in the middle of a warning like this one, every service company in the metro is booked solid. In Maricopa County, dialing 211 connects you to cooling centers, respite sites, and free transportation for people who need it. Fourth, if the reason the air conditioning is off is the bill, make the call before you shut it down. One recent report put the average cooling cost for a Phoenix area household up by roughly $120 over 6 years, and plenty of households cannot absorb that. Utility assistance programs exist, and 211 is the door to them. Turning the unit off to save money is one of the 3 ways the county categorizes these deaths, and it is the one that is most fixable with a phone call. Fifth, check on the people who live alone. Older neighbors, people with heart or kidney conditions, anyone recently out of the hospital. Ask one specific question rather than a general one. Is your air conditioning running right now? Not is it working, not are you all right, is it running? That question has caught failures that the person living with them had stopped noticing. Sixth, if you have a history of falls or you care for someone who does, keep a towel or a light blanket in the car and by the door. If you go down on hot pavement and cannot get up, something to roll onto is the difference between a bad afternoon and a skin graft. That is advice straight out of the burn center, and it is the single least known piece of heat safety I have come across. Seventh, on the ozone alert. On air quality alert days, hard exertion outdoors is doing 2 things to you at once, not one. You are loading your cardiovascular system with heat stress and your lungs with ozone in the same hour. Move it early, move it inside, or skip it. If you have asthma or COPD, treat the alert as the instruction it is. And check the pavement with the back of your hand before your dog walks on it. 5 seconds. If you cannot hold your hand there, neither can they. I am not an alerting authority, and this channel never will be. For anything live, your sources are the National Weather Service office in Phoenix, Maricopa County Emergency Management, and NOAA Weather Radio or your local broadcast. If they tell you something different than I have, they are right and I am stale. Back to Sky Harbor. 97 degrees, in the dark, nobody watching the thermometer. That reading was taken automatically, logged automatically, and filed into a climate record almost nobody outside a Weather Service office was going to open. It set a record, and it did not lead a single newscast, because there is no footage of a warm night. You cannot shoot it. No shimmer over a road, no cracked earth, no reporter frying an egg on a sidewalk. Just a number in a database and a valley full of people whose bodies did not get the break they needed before the sun came up and started charging them again. That is the whole problem in one line. The dangerous part of a heat wave is the part that does not look like anything. So this week, when you see the graphic that says 116, look underneath it. This is a moving situation. The extreme heat warning runs through Saturday evening as it stands. The county death figures update on a weekly cycle, and both of those can change before the week is out. When they do, I will bring it back to you with the source named, the same way I did here. If this was useful, subscribe and turn on notifications so the next one finds you. And thank you to the Cooling Center volunteers, the 211 operators taking those calls, the utility crews holding the grid together in the middle of peak demand, and the paramedics who are going to run these calls all week and most of next. Watch the low, not just the high. I will see you on the next one.